Hey y'all, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm gonna get the baddest S40 bobber into a roller. Let's get it. If you know these motorcycles, you know that this design was designed by Suzuki, just a little bit short. We're gonna take this out, extend this plunger so that way our cam chain can stay in time and that plunger doesn't fall out. Here's the plunger before. Well, in real time, that took about 2 hours. But in YouTube time, lucky for you, 30 seconds. Now I'm installing the clutch. I got new clutch discs for this since I gave my old ones to Sinead. These new clutch discs were dry, so I went ahead and lubricated them and reinstalled the clutch pack. Then after that, I decided, you know what, I've had a ton of these bikes that were straight piped, and I decided I wanted a little bit of a baffle in the exhaust. I mean, this is not going to do a ton, but any sort of back pressure you can put on these exhausts will help with the raspiness, and it'll help just make it a little bit quieter. I mean, they're surprisingly loud with a straight pipe, so got that welded in, and it turned out pretty nice. Let me know what you think of that. Now it's time for epoxy primer. And since it's primer, I just did it outside. Epoxy primer will build. Most people say you have to use a high build primer. It's like basically the only way you can build up your surface, but I had some imperfections in there and it filled a bunch of them with just the epoxy primer. So the high build will be next, and then we can block it flat. Had a couple thin spots where I could see a little bit of metal coming through, so I put another coat on, built it up a little bit more. Now you almost have very few imperfections. This is still very wet, but that epoxy primer builds up pretty good. Even where these dings were, I got most of it out. There's a little drip there, but I could sand that out. But overall, built up very well. I'm using a filler primer next. I'm using this Trust 2K. It's a 4 to 1 part reducer to 1 part hardener. Here I'm just doing a time lapse of the shooting of the high build primer. It came out pretty good. This stuff builds up really well. I'm actually pretty impressed by it. Man, in between coats, this stuff sprays really well, this Trust primer. I'll be honest, I'm pretty happy with it. I know of a few body guys that would say, oh, you know, my car has no Bondo in it. And you'd be like, oh, that's pretty impressive because you did all the metal work yourself. That's amazing. You didn't even need to use any filler. That's crazy. You must be the most adept metal worker ever. But what they didn't tell you was they're just spraying 20 coats of feather fill or filler primer and blocking it down. I mean, this stuff is quite literally liquid Bondo if you look at the ingredients. I say Bondo, but I mean, you know, body filler. And you can just watch the dents disappear. And it flashes so fast that you can just spray it on and then it flashes in like 10 minutes and you spray another coat on and you can just hit the dents over and over and over and over and over and fill them with this stuff. Then yes, I guess technically you didn't put any filler on with a spreader, but you're just spraying Bondo on the dents. And I'm not knocking it. I'm doing it right now. I mean, there's a few dings in this little, I mean, not dings, but imperfections in my weld. And I've put like, you know, 7, 8, 9 coats of this filler primer in those particular areas. And once you block it flat, you'll never know. So anyways, that's my 2 cents. I got, look at those dents are almost gone. There's just a few little spots like there. But if you remember before, this had a lot of little imperfections, but now it's looking pretty good. Even the welds, you can build it up around your welds and it fills in pretty good. Finished with the filler primer, and I will go ahead and get this knocked down with some 400 grit and get it ready for paint. Key here is to sand it down, get it flat without getting back down to the bare metal or even the epoxy primer. So when I have these areas that are a little bit imperfect, I lay a lot of filler primer on there so that I have plenty of material to flatten it out. Right now I'm just using some 220 grit, and then I'll final sand everything with 400. Right now I'm just using 220 on the imperfect spots. And just like that, The dent is gone. Flat, flat, flat. There's another one here. I started it. You can see it just barely. Let's see if I can get it. Yep. I added a lot of material here. This is a compound curve, so you want to, really it's not good to use your fingers, but I don't know, do as I say, not as I do. I go real light and I go at different angles. You want to follow the curve. I'm gonna speed this up with a little bit of time-lapse magic. It's kind of boring stuff. And just like that, the dent is gone. That's pretty good stuff, man, I gotta be honest. Here I'm just doing the same thing with the rear fender. I'll just time-lapse this too. All right, I spent about 4 hours with the block. It's a semi-flexible block. And 400 grit. And got everything pretty flat and ready for paint. I saw a Ford Lightning color that I liked. It was a super, super light gray. It was like basically white, but in the sun it looked like it had a little tint of gray. So I'm just slowly dripping in some black to tint this gray. I can use just a little bit more. Just the slightest bit of black in there, make it almost like an off-white. Yo, check this out. Loving this color. Pretty cool, man. It's got a little bit of orange peel. And some junk fell in it, but nothing I can't wet sand out when I have some time. But I think for now I want to just get this bike back together and worry about wet sanding and buffing later. It's been taking so long on this bobber, and it always does, but I'm excited for the reassembly because, yeah, I think all these colors are going to look really good together. I like all the designs I came up with. The fender struts are really cool. The fender came out really cool. The bobbed fender with the little mount. Oh man, super stoked about that. It's super unique, but still timeless design, very classic. But yeah, I'm gonna get this engine in the frame next, I think, and I'm also going to have to cut down the handlebars. They were a little wide. I want to narrow them down to about 24 inches. It's gonna make this thing about shoulder width. I want it to be a nice little lane splitter. I want the foot pegs and the handlebars to be the same width. I have a custom idea for the wiring harness and a relocation for the switch, which I haven't shown you guys yet, but it's gonna be really cool, so check this out. So as you can see here, I just wanted to go over this. I cut out a part here on the gusseting, opened it up so that, because I knew I had some space in there. So this is where I'm gonna tuck the wiring. I made a panel and I took one of the original switches from the right-hand side, and I'll show you what I did. I figured out that the high-low beam can stay in place. I'm gonna use that. The turn signal can stay here. And then on the bottom, instead of the flash to pass, I'm actually going to fit in the starter button. It has the same mounting points, so I can kind of do a hybrid and just keep the three things that I want. And then as far as the kill switch, this panel, I drilled another hole right there that I'll put the kill switch. So pretty cool. And I left a little open area, as you can see. That will be where the wires tuck in. And then I should have enough space in here to hide all the wiring from the harness, therefore eliminating all the wiring from the top on the handlebars. So that's pretty cool. And here's just a time lapse of me putting the engine side covers back on the engine. A little bit of RTV, new gaskets, and that went back in place pretty easily. Be careful when you're sticking that stator side cover on because it's got a big magnet. We're dropping the engine to the floor. I find it's easier to install engines laying sideways on the floor and just dropping the frame down over them. Took a little finessing, but the motor mount bolts ended up going in pretty well. If you have any trouble with lining up your motor mount bolts, like doing a custom frame, sometimes the engine's a little tricky to get in there. Like this one, you can see I had to tap with a dead blow to get the engine in place, but I make a centering pin that is basically 10 millimeters, the same width as a motor mount bolt, and I just taper the tip like this, and then you can tap it through and it lines up those motor mount holes like I'm showing you here. Then once you get that hammered through, the bolt should line up perfectly. And now the motor mount bolts are in, so I took the front ones back off carefully and installed the forward controls. Just doing this under time lapse because it's pretty boring to watch. And then I got to put the kickstand on. This is actually, I had to do this twice because the kickstand, I shortened it, but I didn't shorten it enough. But here's getting the springs on the kickstand and getting that in place. I wanted to do some low profile Harley pegs. And I got my buddy Sinead back over here. He's just hanging out. How's your Savage running?
Oh, like a beauty, man. 10,000 miles already. Put like, what, 3,000, like, put over 2,000 in 2 months.
Hell yeah. Oh, is the clutch holding up?
Yeah, clutch holding up. Taking care of it now.
All right. Yeah, so Sinead is out over here just helping me and putting these Harley pegs on. And the problem I'm having is the centering pin is a different size, obviously. So I drilled out the Harley peg to about 10 millimeter with a 10 millimeter bit. So this almost fits in, but it's not quite right. So what I'm doing to center this up is I'm spinning the original Suzuki Savage pins down on the lathe. So we'll do that real quick and we'll get these fitted. All right, now we got these laid out and they fit nice and snug. And I left a little bit of the factory lip right here because it fits in this part of the peg mount on the top. So I left about 2 or 3 millimeters on the edge to have it fit in there. Yeah, so see how it tilts down a tiny bit? I think what we're gonna need to do is I'm gonna put a little, on the peg itself, a little tack weld in there so that it keeps it up perfectly straight. You can see closely, I added a little material. I had to add the tack weld right there, but now the peg is straight.
Oh, that's close.
We're just out here shooting slingshots. Some slingshots I made for my kids' camp.
Yeah, it's so fun, bro. These kids have it good, man.
I know.
You got it good.
All right, back to work. We got some boring time lapse of putting the rear wheel on. I had to do this a couple times because I had to make sure the axle spacers were just right. But it went on and everything's lining up pretty well. Put the front sprocket on, but you can see here I tried to get the fender on, and then to get to the bolts I had to remove the rear wheel. Then we put the Fender struts on. They fit really well. I'm pretty happy about that. Here I'm cutting down the handlebars because, like I said earlier, I want these 24 inches wide. Found a couple slugs to put inside to keep the vibrations down. If you add weight to these handlebars, it'll really reduce vibrations. I actually used some old material from a strut from my car, but it fit perfectly in there. So then I drilled out some holes in the handlebar for some plug welds and welded it up, and they came out really nice. And now they're about 5 pounds. Oh, those are heavy now. Whoosh. Plug welds on both sides. Here I took the liberty of adding the brake light and the little mini turns and the license plate light. I'm trying to keep this bike legal. And then we got a little bit of a time lapse for the battery install. The upper mount fit really well. I added some foam to keep the vibrations down too. All right, we got the motor mounts on. We got the decomp on in place with 2 bolts attached there. Got the battery in as I showed you. And I think today I should be getting, I was missing a dust seal for the upper bearing cap. I should be getting that today so I can put the forks on. That'll be good. I applied some vinyl graphics to the fender and I did a pinstripe with pinstripe tape around the outside, and I did the same thing on the tank. Came out pretty cool. Now we got another time lapse of installing the front forks. Here we got the upper and lower triple trees in place, sliding up the forks, getting the fork tubes installed, tightening those down, and then at the end I'm adding some fork oil. I'm just reusing the old fork oil because it was brand new. If you ever do that, just add a filter like I did here. Fork oil's in, and now I can install the risers. These are custom risers. They were a little fiddly, but at the end I got them in and nice and tight. We have plenty of threads up in the riser. Now I'm installing the seat. I decided to paint the springs white. What do you guys think of these spring colors? Do you think it works? If not, I can take them off and repaint them, but I think it looks pretty good. And then next I got the headlight bracket and the headlight and the front mini turns installed. Man, I gotta say, it looks pretty cool. What do you guys think of this one? Now you, go there. And boom. Man, finally wrapping this thing up, getting the front wheel installed. And then I realized when I leaned it that I had to shorten the kickstand up some more. So here was me cutting up the kickstand and re-welding it a little shorter. I took the liberty of taking off that gray paint, and here it is bare metal, but I painted it silver and then reinstalled it. I think it looks a little bit better silver. What do you guys think? And there she is in all her goodness. Look at that thing. God, it's bad. Look at how low that is. Man, that's cool. Oh, I just love the paint colors. The modern headlight. Old school with a modern twist. Look how stretched out it is. I love the engine being perfectly centered right between the wheels. That rake looks really good, man. God, I'm super happy about this. All right, so all we got left now is to get it wired up and controls on, wire it all up, and a few other things. I got to get the brakes connected. You know, the last 5%. It always takes the longest, but that's where we're at. I appreciate you sticking around on this one. If you made it to the end, thank you. Like, subscribe, share with your friends, and in the next video, we'll have this thing running. Let's do it.